be prepared up front to make the decisions that you have to make as they come to you on the field. So I think there's some lessons in life that, for me anyway, is, staying calm in emotional moments and making sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm prepared for the moment when it comes to me. Not that you have to necessarily make 1 or 2 second decisions in everything that you do, but being more prepared to make those decisions when they come your way, I think it is a life-changing lesson for all of us.
For me, I kind of had two careers that were working at the same time. Again, officiating and practicing law. And I'll tell anybody that listens, officiating football made me a better lawyer. Practicing law made me a better official. Well, I mean, the obvious one is that there aren't enough of us, particularly at the youth level. We've read the stories, we've seen the numbers. There is a chronic crisis level shortage of officials at the youth level. And I tend to think it's not so much a recruitment issue because we seem to be able to recruit new officials. We can't keep them. And part of it is everything that Carl talked about, just what appears to be a lack of respect for what we do, and that shows itself up on the field, on the court, on the pitch, and I wonder. I mean, Carl makes a really good point when he says they're not booing youth. If it's just the people who are so disrespectful to officials, they just don't know any. And so how do we humanize ourselves more?
We've talked a lot about in the officiating community. We've talked about the erosion of sportsmanship, and that's it. Coaches, parents, players, and everybody involved. I think that probably is the single most issue that can cause distractions, can get an official off track. It's just really unfortunate that people behave the way they behave, and really don't respect authority of any kind these days for that matter. But specifically, when we get into an officiating environment, the way that we're spoken to, the way that we're treated, people getting followed, officials getting followed to their cars, things like that are, definitely a headwind that, we had to deal with probably Ron and I when we started out, but it certainly is not to the level that it is now.
And now, Season 2, Episode 3, Letter C. Challenges. Join hosts Dana Pappas and Nate Acosta with special guests Carl Cheffers and Ron Torbert on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas here with my co-host Nate Acosta. Today's episode will address a topic that officials, sports fans, and people who are just curious about officiating will not want to miss as we talk about the challenges of officiating.
The sport or level, officiating is hard work and requires dedication, commitment, courage, and a love of sport. It requires the desire to be something bigger than ourselves, and while there are certainly rewards in officiating, the profession or avocation does not come without challenges. Our word of the day as we cover the letter C.
We have two incredible guests today who both wear the white hat on the fields of the NFL. First up is Carl Cheffers, who began officiating high school football in 1980, was hired into the Pac-10 in 1995, also worked in the WAC at that time, and became a side judge in the NFL in 2000. He was promoted to referee in 2008 and has worked 3 Super Bowls, most recently... Ooh, Carl, I'm going to need your help. My script didn't cover that. When was your most recent?
57.
What year was that?
2022.
Thank you. He was promoted to referee in 2008 and has worked 3 Super Bowls, most recently in 2022. Carl is on the board of directors for Sports Officials Care, and I'm happy to work with him on that board. Welcome to the show, Carl.
Thank you. It's great to be here with all of you. Thank you, Dana.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're honored. I'm so excited. We just started. I'm so excited about this show.
Absolutely. Our next guest is Ron Torbert, began officiating in a NFL in 2010 as a side judge before being promoted to referee in 2014. He has worked 2 Super Bowls, including the most recent between the Chiefs and Eagles earlier this month. Ron currently serves as the vice chairperson of the NASO Board of Directors. Ron, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dana. You as well. Really excited to be here. Thank you.
This is so much fun. I'm excited. We're going to jump in. But before we actually start talking about the topic of the day of challenge, we really want to ask each of you to just kind of tell us a little bit about your officiating journeys, how you got started, and really what your path was to get you into the NFL. We'll start with Carl first and then have Ron close that question out for us.
Sounds great, Dana. Well, I started in 1980, as you said, so that's a long road. So, fortunately, it's been a fun journey for me. And like most officials, I got started at very entry levels, working Pop Warner and high school, junior varsity. Back in the days, we used to have freshman and sophomore football as well. So, really started at some very basic stuff. I actually started at 19 years old in intramurals at UC Irvine and found a love for it. So decided I wanted to do some high school football and contacted my dad, who also officiated. I grew up in an officiating family, and he hooked me up with the friends that hung around our house and said they'll help you on your path to officiating. So they got me started in high school, and just like most officials, I worked my way up from being a referee in high school to junior college. We have a lot of very well-developed junior college football out here in Southern California, and Division III football, and eventually into the Pac-10 and at the time. And I also worked games in the WAC, as you mentioned. And I got a call one day from Mike Pereira, who was running the officiating program, or involved in running the officiating program at the NFL, and asked me if I wanted to go to NFL Europe. And of course, for an official, having an opportunity to go to Europe in those days meant you were being considered to get into the NFL. So of course I said yes. I was a head linesman at the time if I wasn't refereeing, and I was a head linesman in the pack. And he said, well, we want you to go to NFL Europe, but we want you to be a side judge. And I'm like, Mike, I'm going to say yes, but I've never worked a game at side judge in my life, so I'm not sure how this is going to go. And he said, well, we'll see how, we'll make sure you're ready to go and give you a good shot. So anyway, I went to NFL Europe. It all worked out well. Was hired in the NFL, as you said, as a side judge. Became a referee in 2008, and I've had a very lucky, fortunate, very blessed career in the NFL, working on year 26 coming up.
That's quite a ride. Goodness.
A long ride.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
The ride that most of us would certainly love to take. We're all trying to get where Carl is, for sure. I got started. I didn't have any officials in my family or that I knew. I got started in officiating. I say it's almost by accident. I graduated from law school in 1988. I took the bar exam that summer and began working with a law firm in Lansing, Michigan in the fall of 1988. There was another lawyer in the firm who was a high school official. He had left the firm right around the same time that I joined the firm to take a job in Northern Ohio. He continued to be an official that fall, continued to work high school games that fall. He would drive from the Toledo area into Michigan and work games. And near the end of that season, decided he just couldn't commit to working games in Michigan anymore. So he reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to become a football official and take my spot on my high school crew? I was a big fan of the game, but I knew zero about officiating. Didn't know anything about it. Never paid any attention to the officials, except occasionally to heckle them or boo them. I said, he said, hey, come on out, meet the crew. We got one more game left this season. Come meet the crew. We'll, stand on the sidelines, watch what we do. And I went out and watched the game, and for the first time watched a game to watch the officials. And it looked like it might be fun. So I said, sure, I'll do it. Fast forward 1 year, I was working freshman and junior varsity games on Thursday, 8th grade games on Wednesday, and some varsity games on Friday night. And I was immediately hooked. Just had no idea what I was doing. My crew threw me out on the field. They said they made me an umpire because they said they figured that's where I could do the least damage. And they said, keep your flag in your pocket, keep your whistle out of your mouth, and don't get run over. That was my mechanics training before I went out on the field for my first game. And for the most part, I was successful in doing that. I did get run over once or twice, but I worked high school football for 10 years. and then decided, I wonder what it'd be like to, try this at the next level, bigger, faster players. So I went to a couple of officiating camps. I got hired in a Division II conference in Michigan in 1989. Spent 1 year as a line of scrimmage official and then got moved to referee. So for the next 5 years, I refereed at the Division II level. Then got a call from Carl Paganelli Sr., who was the supervisor of officials for the Mid-American Conference. He brought me into the MAC. I spent 1 year in the MAC and then 4 years in the Big Ten. And in 2010, I got the call that Carl got. Mike Pereira and Carl Johnson were on the other end of the line and asked me if I would wanted to join the staff of the NFL. And I'd spent 1 year in NFL Europe in 2007, which was just a phenomenal experience. And so when Mike called, said, "Do you want to join the NFL?" I said, "Absolutely." Came into the NFL as a side judge, did that for 4 years. And then in 2014, got my own crew and have done that for the last 11 years. And just it's been the most fun that I've ever had.
Man, I mean, we talked about it right before getting on to the show. I mean, it's the two of you have had a lot of success and just a ton of fun that we were able to lock both of you down on our show. And, so the fact that we have two white hats that have worked 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls on our show today, can you tell us what it was like to get the call from the league, letting you know that you're working the Super Bowl, and what was the first one different from the last one? Ron, we'll start with you.
Well, so the way the process works is that the calls come out on Tuesday, the Tuesday after the divisional round. And so historically, it's not universally true, but historically, the officials that will get assigned to the Super Bowl will work one of the divisional round games. So if you work a divisional round game, you at least, you think, well, maybe there's a call, it's possible, but you're really not expecting it. The first time uh, after the 2021 season, I got up, I went to the gym, worked out, came back home, and I'm just kind of, figuring out what to do next. And the phone rings. Walt Anderson is on the other end of the line, and he said, "Ron, I'm calling with the call that you've waited your whole career to get. You're going to be the referee for Super Bowl 56." And I honestly don't remember a whole lot that happened on the phone after that. There was some logistics stuff that we talked about, and I know I was taking notes, but I really wasn't paying much attention. And I got off the phone. The first thing I did is I ran to the next room. I found my wife, gave her a big hug, and I said, "We did it." And then I started calling. I think the second I told my wife, I told my kids, and then I think I called Jerry Markbright. And you start thinking about the people that really, really were instrumental in helping you get to that place. And Jerry was one of those people for me. And I had to call him and tell him. And then I think I called the rest of my family, and and so this year's call, Ramon George called me, and it wasn't as solemn as the first one. Ramon called me up and he said, "I hope you got your voice back," and said, "You're going to be the referee for Super Bowl 59." I said, "Thanks, Ramon. I'll go drink some tea. I'll be okay." But the feeling though is exactly the same. It was exactly the same the second time as it was the first time. You want to let your family know. You want to thank your family. You want to let your crew know, because nobody gets to that point without the help from their crew during the year. You call up those people that helped you along the way. People have asked me, was it the same? Yeah, it was the same. It was just as exciting the second time as it was the first time.
The biggest takeaway that I got from that, Ron, was when you said you went into the other room and you told your wife, "We did it."
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Dana and I talk about the importance of our support system at home and our families, and we know that without her, you don't get to do what you do. And so I appreciate that you told that part of the story.
Yeah. Oh, listen. I'm not telling you any of you anything you don't already know. This gig can be really hard. It can be hard on a family, and if you don't have that support, I tell people that coming up through high school and small college, I would always ask my wife every spring. I said, "Are you still okay with me doing this? You know, we're coming into the summer. We're going to get ready for the season." And I would ask her, "Are you okay with me doing this? If you tell me you're not," because we had young kids, we got a son and a daughter, and I said, "If you tell me you're not okay, I'll stop." And I was grateful because she always said, "No, keep going." And I remember when I got into the Big Ten, I stopped asking because quite frankly, I was afraid I was afraid what the answer was going to be. But she's always been there, and so I had to let her know, hey, you're just as big a part of this as I am.
But you almost so Carl still has to tell his side of it, but Ron, you almost made me cry twice in your answer. One was the "we did it," and the second part was the call to Jerry Markbright, because you know how much Jerry means to
Yeah,
me,
I
and
do. I do. Yeah.
that was twice that I was sucking back tears on your response. So thanks a lot for that. You're not supposed to make me cry, Ron, but
I'm sorry. I'm
that's all
sorry.
right.
We'll
That's all
we'll
right.
try harder.
No, you'll probably just make me cry more, but it's okay.
Okay.
I'm weepy like that. You should know I'm emotional. But Carl, you're up.
Yeah, what a day that was for sure. When I received that call to work Super Bowl 51, I was the president of the board of directors at the Boys and Girls Club here in town at the time. And we had an event in our gymnasium that morning. And like Ron said, you kind of start reading the tea leaves a little bit as to who's going to work the game, and you kind of figure out you might have a pretty good chance. I knew the call, if it came, it was going to come during this meeting. I was supposed to be welcoming people to our facility, and the vice president, friend of mine, was standing next to me, and I said, "Look, if this phone rings and it says NFL office, you're taking over. You're gonna have to do the speech. You're gonna have to welcome everybody here because I got to take this call, right?" And sure enough, I mean, no longer had I said that, and the phone rings and it says NFL office, and I bolted for what I thought was a quiet area, and Dean Blandino was on the other end, and he, asked me, mundane questions about the weather and everything else. And then finally he said, "I'd like to know if you'd like to be the referee for Super Bowl 51." And, you kind of prepare yourself for it, but all of a sudden just a flood of emotions comes, to you. I mean, I still feel it right now. A flood of emotions come to you. It's not complete. It is validation. I mean, you still have other work that you've done well, and people will remember you for other work, but certainly it is validation for all the people that have invested in you, like Ron said, your family and friends and the Jerry Markbrights of the world. For me, it was Larry Nemmers. He was my referee before I became a referee, and you get that call, and like Ron said, they go through some logistics and things that I have no idea what he told me. And I'm pretty sure that I did not say yes until the staff dinner Thursday night before the game, because I was pretty choked up and I couldn't talk too well. So I'm pretty sure I didn't say yes until Thursday. So fortunately, he didn't call anybody else. I got the game. And like Ron said, you kind of have your list of people that you want to call. They give you an hour before they're going to release it to the media. And so you have kind of an hour to call people that you want to make sure they hear this from you. And that really extends to everybody. It is your family for sure that we made it. But it's all the people that have invested in you over the years, and my father was a key person in my officiating career. He had to retire before I even started officiating, so he went to every game and gave me critiques. And so I thought of him. I wear his ring to this day. I thought of him and my mom. Both of them had passed at the time. But you think about all the people that have invested in you and just the validation that they are all going to get, because you're going to have an opportunity to work the biggest game in football. And so all that just kind of floods you at that moment, and it's just really overwhelming, and so you take a couple of deep breaths and you conclude that phone call, and then you do have an hour, so you immediately start calling people that you have to call. And unfortunately I wasn't at home, but got to call my wife and kids and mentors, and you just make these phone calls as fast as you can. And then the reality kind of sets in that you got to start making plane reservations, Ron, right, for all the people that you're going to take with you.
Yep.
But it's amazing. I've been just extremely lucky to get that phone call 3 times. Well, the second time was a little, just you just never know if you're going to get that call. And I'd like to say I was much more composed on the second and third times. I wasn't any more composed the second or third time as I was at the first time. It's just an overwhelming sense of achievement, an overwhelming responsibility, and just an awesome opportunity to let the people who have supported you enjoy the experience with you. So it's a great call to get.
And Carl got me choked up too. What is, I was going to say, what's wrong with you? But I think what's wrong with me? I'm so emotional right now. But that's just, I love hearing that. And I think, I've had the opportunity to work with both of you in different boards and different capacities. And I think what's so cool is when they make that announcement, you see it on social media, and obviously anybody who's working the Super Bowl or the World Series or the NBA championships, they're obviously good officials. But what I love is when I see it's Carl Cheffers, Ron Torbert, all these people who I know are just good human beings. And it's so cool to celebrate that. Like, your resume is awesome. You guys are both amazing. We know you're good officials, but knowing you personally and just knowing those are good guys, like it gives you have someone to cheer for. Even like, I know this year when Ron got selected, I was like, man, now I have a team that I can cheer for this year. I was so excited because, as officiating people, we cheer for each other. And I mean, no one else are our fans. So we've got to have each other. But I think that being able to see those it's just the coolest thing when you're like, yeah, that's exactly who should be working that game. So love that, and loved hearing kind of the stories and the excitement. And I mean, as both of you were talking, I could just feel your emotion, your enthusiasm, and see how meaningful that is. And there is a moment where you get that call and you're like, am I being punked? Like, seriously, is this happening? There's that surreal element to it of, how did this happen? Like, how did I get here? And I just love hearing that. I appreciate you guys sharing that with us.
Thanks.
So
You
now that we've
bet.
kind of set the stage and heard about your journeys and some Super Bowl stuff, we're going to move on to the topic of the day, which is, of course, challenge. And we're actually going to go kind of a couple of different directions with this on the show. First question is, what are some of the biggest challenges that officials face as they move through those various levels of officiating, from youth to high school to college to pro? And we'll start with Carl this time.
Yeah, it is a journey. And, the story I told earlier, was a 20-year journey for me to get to the NFL. And certainly, not everybody, of course, is going to make it to the NFL. There's 121 on-field officials. So it gets very steep as you move up in your career. So as far as opportunities, it's so rare, to get, I always say more people flew on the space shuttle. It's very rare to get appointed to work in the NFL. So really the challenge, I think, is to stay motivated and just allow things to work at their time. You certainly want to prepare yourself. You want to make sure that, you're performing at a top level. You want to make sure that you are being considered for opportunities to move up. You got to control the things that you can control. But at the end of the day, your progression through the different levels is going to take some time, and it's stuff that you can't control yourself. So, really for me is, enjoy every single game, enjoy every single level that you are working. I still miss high school football. I am a member of my high school unit. I go to meetings there occasionally. I go watch high school football. I still miss high school football. There's a certain romance about that. And, the Friday Night Lights, it's all true, and so, it just enjoy every single moment. And if it takes a little longer for you to get to the next level, just think about how better prepared you're going to be when you do get that opportunity. So I think is, preparedness and patience and persistence. Those are things that will work well for you as you move up through the different levels.
For me, it's interesting you asked that question. I was thinking about it while Carl was talking. I think for me, the challenges kind of evolved and changed over the years. I when I first started working high school football, I mentioned had just gotten out of law school, starting to practice law. I was working with a big firm in Michigan. I remember I graduated from law school in 1988. I started officiating in 1989. I got married and started a family in 1990. And so for me, at least in those early years, the biggest challenge for me was balancing work and family and trying to figure out where officiating fit in and how it was going to fit in. I loved officiating, but I probably didn't spend as much time on it as I should have. I remember Friday afternoon closing the door to my office so that nobody would walk in and give me an assignment. And I'd change clothes while I'm in the office and try to sneak out before anybody realized I was heading off to a game. And the challenge was balancing all of that and figuring it all out. When I got to the college level, the challenge kind of changed for me. Now it's sort of how do I manage that transition from what essentially started out as a hobby to what's more now of a job or business. You get even at the Division II level, you're working college football. This is a business now. There's money involved in it. From this terms of coaches' salaries and now players getting paid, I had to get used to suddenly being under more scrutiny. We had a supervisor who evaluated our games and gave me feedback. I call it feedback now. It just sounded like criticism at the time. We had a really tough supervisor, and so the challenge was how do I manage all of that? For the first time, I'm being graded. Now at the NFL level, the challenge was how do you deal with the physicality of the game? It's a lot more physical, it's faster, they're bigger, and the lights are a lot brighter. And how do you manage the noise? There's a lot of noise that surrounds officiating, and there's noise at every level. It's really loud at the NFL level. How do you manage that? So we've had to try to manage those varying challenges over the course of the career. They kind of change and evolve, but they're always there.
Yeah, I think both of you had something that related to me personally. This season by far has been probably my most successful season that I've had. And you both talked about challenges of being patient and the challenges of, also being prepared. And those are things that I think that man, they just hit home because it was a slow process for what I believe was a slow process. And then all of a sudden it just boom, it happens and you're given opportunities that you're not expecting, but that in that process, in that slow, drawn out process, you're being prepared for the moment that when that was accelerated, you're ready to go. And unfortunately, I think the biggest thing officials forget is that the longer the process, just the more developed you're going to be. And I think some officials, don't get me wrong, get it a little sooner than others. But I think if you can be patient and you can hang on tight, the rewards are going to be beneficial.
I couldn't agree with you more, Nate. It seems maybe it's just maybe it's just me getting older, but it just seems like younger officials aren't as patient as they used to be. They're not as patient as we were. Carl talked about a 20-year journey to get to the NFL. For me, it was 21. People don't seem willing to wait that long anymore. If they're not working at a Power Four conference by the time they're 5 years in, they're looking to do something else. And it just doesn't work like that. Because the journey took so long for me, I appreciate it more. I feel like I'm more ready. I feel like I'm having more fun.
Yes.
I feel like I took the time to enjoy Friday nights like Carl was talking about,
Well,
and Saturday afternoons in college stadiums where there were only 500 people in the stands. That was fun.
and if you're not ready, I mean, you could really damage your career, and I don't think enough people understand that. And fortunately for me, I've gone through that process, and now when I make mistakes, at least there's a little rapport behind it. There's something that there's a little rapport with my coordinators, and those mistakes aren't magnified as much. And so it's definitely a good thing to be patient. From a different angle, what do you think are some of the greatest challenges, both internal and external, to the individual, the officials face while working at contests? Carl?
Well, certainly we've talked a lot about in the officiating community. We've talked about the erosion of sportsmanship, and that's it. Coaches, parents, players, and everybody involved. I think that probably is the single most issue that can cause distractions, can get an official off track. It's just really unfortunate that people behave the way they behave, and really don't respect authority of any kind these days for that matter. But specifically, when we get into an officiating environment, the way that we're spoken to, the way that we're treated, people getting followed, officials getting followed to their cars, things like that are, definitely a headwind that, we had to deal with probably Ron and I when we started out, but it certainly is not to the level that it is now. So, certainly when I talk to officials, I tell them, look, people are yelling at your uniform. They're not yelling at you. They don't know you. They don't know me. They don't know, that I'm on the board at the Boys and Girls Club, that I do good charity work, that I'm involved in my community, that, I have kids and grandkids. They don't know any of that kind of stuff. They just know I'm an official, that I'm a person that has authority, and they don't like people with authority. So, I think that's probably one of the biggest headwinds is just staying motivated, staying positive, staying upbeat, and moving on to the next play. If you have a tough play, you move on to the next play. So, that's always been a challenge, but I think it's just to another level now. And being able to officiate long enough to fall in love with it, like Ron and I have, all that stuff, really, is not quite as important, not quite as impactful when you look forward to working a game every week. So I think that's probably the singular thing that's most challenging to officials these days.
It's hard for me to come up with anything to add to that. I mean, it's certainly externally how we're dealt with, how we're viewed, is a huge challenge. Because it can be a distraction while you are trying to work this game, work this match. Um, Internally, I think one of the bigger challenges, for me was learning how the importance of being able to manage a game, manage a contest, and then figure out how to do it. I didn't tell Carl that I was going to say this, but one of the reasons that I enjoy watching Carl work so much is because he's such a great manager of the game. I tell people when Carl's working a game, the game starts, the game stops, and there's not a whole lot of crap that happens in the middle. And that game is over, and nobody's really thinking they're talking about Carl and his crew because he's got a gift for being able to manage a game from start to finish, and that's a real challenge. It's that transition from thinking that you are in control of the game to just understanding that it's not about you, just manage the game. It really is true that nobody paid to see us. So just, I'd pay to see you, Dana. I really,
I would pay to see you guys. I mean, I'm not there to watch the teams at all. Like,
but it's learning that is, I have taken, the last few years, I've really taken that on as an internal challenge is can I be a better game manager? And that's actually been a fun challenge. Managing the fans and the parents and all that is not a fun challenge, at least not anymore. But trying to learn how to manage a game has actually been a fun challenge.
those were both such good responses. And obviously, coming from the high school space, we're dealing with the sportsmanship issue all the time. And, there's a lot of issues at the youth sports space that are, that we don't have the authority over or the oversight. And that makes it challenging because sometimes that behavior comes up from youth sports and it's like, will we be able to reach these parents? So I think there's a little struggle there. And then, Ron, what you were talking about game management, when you talk to new officials as they're coming in, thought of, well, I know the rules, I know where I'm supposed to stand, I know how to blow the whistle, but they have no idea what game management means because that's so experiential. That's something that they have to get out there and do. And I love the fact that you said, as a veteran NFL official, the thing I love about watching Carl work. So knowing that even at your level, you guys are still watching each other, learning from each other, and gleaning things from each other that you can apply and strive to. Like you said, it was a personal challenge for you, Ron. And I love that because that process of learning doesn't end just because you made it into the NFL. It's something that is continual from a development standpoint. And both of those answers were absolutely exceptional. Thank you guys both for that. So you're both people who were very involved with officiating outside of the NFL in terms of NASO, in terms of sports officials care. So kind of globally, what are some of the challenges, the biggest challenges that you think are facing the officiating industry as a whole? I think, Ron, we'll start with you this time.
Well, I mean, the obvious one is that there aren't enough of us, particularly at the youth level. We've read the stories, we've seen the numbers. There is a chronic crisis level shortage of officials at the youth level. And I tend to think it's not so much a recruitment issue because we seem to be able to recruit new officials. We can't keep them. And part of it is everything that Carl talked about, just what appears to be a lack of respect for what we do, and that shows itself up on the field, on the court, on the pitch, and I wonder. I mean, Carl makes a really good point when he says they're not booing youth. If it's just the people who are so disrespectful to officials, they just don't know any. And so how do we humanize ourselves more? How do we get people to know who we are, what we do, how much time and effort we put into it, how much pride we take. I would love for people to know that when a call gets missed, there is absolutely nobody that feels worse about it than I do. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people booing and criticizing and wringing their hands over it, but I can promise you that nobody feels worse about my missed call than I do. And there's just a part of me that says if I could just get people to understand that, maybe we could deal with the lack of respect, which then in turn will help us retain officials. We just got to keep people in the profession until they love it so much the way Carl and I do that you just can't run us out. I mean, at some point, I'm getting yelled at and screamed at and cursed at on the sidelines and called all kinds of names. I just loved what I was doing more than I hated the noise that I was hearing. And so, I wasn't going anywhere. So how do we keep people in long enough to get them to that point?
Yeah, and I mean, certainly that's probably the biggest challenge that we have is just the overall environment that we have to work in. Certainly at the lower levels, Ron and I get yelled at, but we expect that, and people pay a lot of money to come to our games, and so that just kind of goes with the territory. But frankly, the lower levels are the ones that are the most challenging. There's not, there isn't security. The parents are a lot closer to you, and fans are a lot closer to you, and so, I mean, those levels are really the most challenging. The sports officials care that you mentioned that is a group that is working towards restoring dignity and humanity to officiating, so we can, bridge the gap for recruiting officials to try to make sure that we have enough officials to cover the games that need to be played. So that really is a group of officials from the NFL, NBA, MLB, MLS. We're all coming together to use the platforms that we've been given to try and make sure that officials are treated with respect. And if we can make a dent in that, so to speak, then we can start to recruit. We can try to get officials past year 1, year 2. And once you get to year 3, you probably have developed a little bit of a passion for it. And I think you're going to stick around. It's really getting to a point where we can try and restore some sort of dignity and just keep the other stakeholders from dissuading young officials from continuing to develop their skills and find a passion for officiating. It's a big challenge. We certainly need more officials. And, one of the things, if there are officials listening to this, one of the things that I challenge the groups that I talk to is to prepare yourself for those inevitabilities. And, we talk about, Dana, you talked about earlier, studying the rules and our mechanics, where we're standing and where we're looking. And, one of the things that we don't do is rehearse our communications with coaches, with players, with other stakeholders. We don't rehearse that. And to me, it's something that is very something that we can easily practice and easily rehearse. We know what those confrontations are going to be like. We know what they're going to ask. They're going to challenge us on a ruling or a judgment that we've made, some other aspect of the game. We know what those conversations are going to be like, a large portion of them. So rehearse them. And if we rehearse them, we not only go in with more confidence, but we are able to manage that communication better. And, the last thing that we want to do is go in with a high level of emotion like the coach is maybe exhibiting. We have to go in and de-escalate that situation, I say match the intensity, but not the emotion. And, but we can rehearse those. And certainly as a young official, you know that you're going to get your share of criticism, and it's going to come. So while you're studying the rules, while you're studying your mechanics, spend a few minutes rehearsing the communications that you're going to have with the various stakeholders so you are more confident and prepared to manage your way through those.
That's such a great point, because we always tell officials, get in the mirror and do your signals, and they do it, but we don't talk enough about that. When Nate and I were back in New Mexico, we had a referee educational forum where we would actually do some role playing, and we'd have some of our clinicians that would act as coaches, and we'd make the officials figure out how to respond to it. And some of the first year officials were petrified. They were just like, what is going on? And I'm like, this guy's your friend. If you can't figure out how to deal with him, you're going to have a problem when it's a real game setting. Like you said, that's going to be inevitable. There's emotion involved. Coaches are, they're working hard for their kids and doing all those things, and there's so much emotion with it, but we don't stress that enough as far as that communication element. There's some officials that take it a little too literal, and they're like, well, can you write a script? Well, no, because I don't know exactly everything that will ever be said. So there's no, like, when coach says this, you say that, but we can get close as far as just that emotion and things that you have heard a lot as officials, and some commonalities that go in there. But that's such a great point. And I know Nate probably feels that way as well.
Absolutely. The other challenge that we don't rehearse is adversity, right? How to handle the adversity, whether you don't get that Super Bowl call, right? If you don't get that assignment that you want, if we made a mistake and how we move on to the next play, we don't rehearse that. And I had a mentor tell me a long time ago that, you have to think about the worst things that could possibly happen to you out there and tell yourself, how am I going to overcome that adversity? How am I going to overcome the fact that I didn't get to the next round? Or how am I going to overcome that I blew a call that cost the team? And so those are the things that we also don't rehearse, and those are the challenges that I think we deal with. And especially early on in our officiating careers, I don't think that first or second year official, when they make that big mistake, or they're not patient and they're not getting what they want, that's when we lose them. And so I think part of our preparation, and I just, I'm going to jot this down because I think that this is something that I want to work on with some training groups, is practicing how to deal with adversity in officiating.
That's good stuff. So one of my favorite expressions is, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. How do you think the challenge of officiating has changed you in other aspects of your life? I don't know who wants to jump in first. I'll leave it up to you guys to duke it out.
Well, I think staying calm in very difficult situations, I think, has helped me out a lot. I'm pretty good at separating the emotion of the moment from the decisions that have to be made. I always likened, that people ask you, what do you like about officiating? And I said, it's just immediate. We have to make decisions very quickly. And a lot of those decisions are made based on our experience, our preparation, things like that. And I used to work for a big Fortune 500 company. And for those of you that have worked for a big company, you know that decisions are made much more over time. You kind of come up with some suggestions, you kind of run it up the flagpole, see what happens, see which way the wind blows. And then based on that, you bring the flag back down and make another suggestion, right? Well, that's not how it works in officiating. You have to be prepared up front to make the decisions that you have to make as they come to you on the field. So I think there's some lessons in life that, for me anyway, is, staying calm in emotional moments and making sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm prepared for the moment when it comes to me. Not that you have to necessarily make 1 or 2 second decisions in everything that you do, but being more prepared to make those decisions when they come your way, I think it is a life-changing lesson for all of us.
For me, I kind of had two careers that were working at the same time. I did, again, officiating and practicing law. And I'll tell anybody that listens, officiating football made me a better lawyer. Practicing law made me a better official. It just in terms of having to think on your feet, make, as Carl said, quick decisions, sometimes based on limited information, but certainly knowing that you need to gather as much information as you can so that you can make the right decision. All of those things really paralleled or really were part of both of my careers. Officiating has taught me how to work in the gray area. There's everything that the rule book says, and then there's everything it doesn't say or doesn't say quite as clearly as you would like. How do you work in the gray area? You have to do a lot of that when you're practicing law. So all of those things, and just at the end of the day, just wanting to do the right thing. So those, I got to do both of those. I got to do those things in both of my careers. Frankly, officiating, I think, has also made me better at home, made me a better husband, better father, better brother. Because the one thing it took me a long time to learn this in officiating, but at some point, I figured out it wasn't about me. Um, or at least it's not all about me. And so that's really helped me at home in dealing with my family, dealing with friends, just realizing that, there are other perspectives, there are other points of view to be considered, and again, you gather the information and you try to make the best decision you can to do the right thing.
We're about to close this thing out, and we like to close our podcast out every week with our mission. And every week, our mission is to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. Dana and I challenge each of you to give our listeners a message that fulfills that mission. And we'll start with Carl.
Wow. I think Ron and I have had some success in football officiating, that's for sure. And again, it takes a lot of people. We represent a lot of people when, we're out on the field, all the people that invested in us along the way. And so it does take a lot of people to contribute to you for your success. But, just keep moving. Enjoy every second of officiating. Enjoy every game. You never know what's going to come your way, when you're going to have another opportunity. So enjoy every single second. I know for me, the 3 hours on the field is absolute, so enjoyable, and I don't want to miss a minute. So, enjoy every second. Keep moving forward. Keep preparing yourself for the opportunities that are going to be coming your way. Hopefully, you will enjoy officiating as much as I have, and be able to have a long, sustained career and reach some success at the level that you're working. Best of luck. Thanks for letting me participate.
So I guess Nate, I'm gonna answer your challenge with a challenge of my own, and I'm gonna challenge all of us, all officials, to take better care of each other off the field and on the field. And what I mean by that, off the field, hey, let's celebrate each other's success. You talked earlier about, how do you handle it when you don't get the assignment that you wanted, or you don't get that call for that postseason game, or that big, crosstown rivalry that you really wanted to get. And so many of us respond by saying, why X and not me? I have no problem asking the question, why not me? Because that forces me to look inward, hey, did I do all that I could? I'll never ask why X. And so I would like to see us do more to celebrate each other's success. When your friend, somebody on your crew, somebody gets that big game, help them celebrate that success. Help each other get better during the off season, and so that we can all enjoy the success on the field. When I say take care, I'd like to see us take better care of each other. Say before we take the field, I always tell my crew, hey, if we do three things, we're going to be successful today. First is communicate with each other. Um, really, really, just talk to each other, be engaged, be part of the game. Second thing is to be there for each other. I think you said it earlier, Dana. You could be in a stadium with 65,000 people and nobody cares about us except us. And nobody's going to care about us except us. It's a little paranoid, but the point is we need to look out for each other. We need to be there for each other. If you've got some information to share that information. If somebody's sharing information with you, listen to what they're saying, because they're trying to do what's best for the crew. And the third thing is, I tell, at some point during this game, each one of us is going to have an opportunity to step up and save the crew. And when your opportunity comes, do not let it pass you by, because you'll regret it if you do. And so I would like to see us take better care of each other on and off the field. If we do that, everything else takes care of itself. We'll have more fun. We'll get better assignments. We'll progress at the pace that we should progress. Maybe not the pace you want to progress, but just always remember, you never know who's watching. I got on the NFL's radar because Jerry Bergman Sr. came to a Division II game at Mercyhurst College to watch his grandson play, and watched my crew and said, hey, you should give the NFL, give them a call and submit an application. You don't know who's watching. So work every game as if it's the most important game, because to the players and the coaches and the parents sitting in the stands, that game is the most important one. And if everything else takes care of itself. That's my challenge for all of us.
I like that you answered our challenge with a challenge. That was fantastic. Gosh, Carl Cheffers, Ron Torbert, thank you so much for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. I know how busy you both are, and Nate and I are so grateful for your time and for the wisdom you shared, and the laughter, and on my end, the tears. But I'm so fortunate to know both of you and to be able to work with you with SOC, with NASO, and there are such good people who officiate, and the two of you are definitely among them. And I'm such a fan of both of you, and just proud to call you friends. And I really appreciate you doing this, and know that the listeners will definitely gain something. And like I feel with both of you, I'm a better person because I know you. And I appreciate everything you do for the avocation and the profession of officiating, because it goes a long way, especially with us at the high school level. So thank you for what you do, and for just making it better for all of us.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys, and thanks. I do have a random question. So when you go back and watch your Super Bowl, do you go back and watch all the commercials?
I will be quite frank. I've said this to some people. I've not said this publicly to a big audience like this. I have not watched either Super Bowl game.
Okay. Hey.
And I probably will never watch either one. When we watch our games, when we watch our film, we watch it with a critical eye. We want to break down every play. We want to break down our mechanics, our judgment, our calls. And those two games, I have a memory of those games. It might be better than I actually did. But I remember those games in a certain way, and I don't want to do anything that's going to screw up that memory. So I'm not going to watch them, because I'll just start picking things apart, and I don't want to do that.
Your own worst critic, like all officials.
I will at some point go watch the halftime shows, because I really want to see the halftime shows. But
Okay.
You don't get to see those in the locker room.
But I'm not gonna watch the games.
Okay. Carl?
Yeah, I haven't watched the games either. I have a great memory of all of them on the field. I was there. I enjoyed every bit of it, and I don't think it's going to get any better by watching it, so I haven't watched it either. And
That's kind of cool.
I'm just going to leave it with the great memory that I had, and I'm sure Ron's getting ready for next year just as I am. You enjoy the moment and move forward.
I love it. Well, do you guys watch each other's?
Well, I watched him.
Carl.
I got to watch him. I was an alternate at the Super Bowl, so I got to watch
That's
Ron
right.
work. It was my pleasure to watch him work. He did a great job, and I was just lucky I had a chance to be there.
Yeah. Well, I've already told you I watched Carl because
You're a fan.
I learned from him. So
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much. Have a great season. We'll be cheering for you all year. So we look forward to seeing you on our TV on all those days and nights that the NFL plays, and we're looking forward to that.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It was an honor to be here, and it's an honor to know you both. Thank you.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right. Hey, thank you. All right, and thank you for joining us. To our listeners from the A to Zebra podcast, don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. See you next time.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.